Welcome everyone to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me as always is my co-host, Walt Schwenk. Hey, Walters.
Hello, Steven. How's it going?
Hello, Walters. I interrupted you there. I'm so sorry. I forgot our cadence. It's a new year. I don't know what was wrong with me. I forgot about the how's it going. It's going very well. How are you? Welcome to 2022.
Yes, welcome. And, no apologies necessary for interrupting my weird, somewhat disinterested intro.
Though you're not disinterested this time because we're talking about your favorite wrestler of all time today.
Yes. Well, I mean, anytime we talk HBK, I'm all in, so.
Yeah, and that's who we're discussing today, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle. And we are talking about them through the context of WWE Untold, Angle vs. HBK. Well, this is an episode of Untold. It came out last year. But we decided to talk about it because, fuck it, it's 2022. We've been talking about weird stuff for a while now. And we're like, let's talk about some wrestling. Let's talk about wrestling. Let's watch a wrestling match. And let's get back to, like, why we like this stuff in the first place. Is because of what goes on in and around the ring. Not necessarily the books, the big show, the various crap we've been discussing. Crap and non-crap, but the various assorted items we've been talking about for a couple weeks and months now.
Yeah, it's weird that a wrestling book club would talk about wrestling matches.
I mean, we started this whole thing because we liked stuff on the outskirts of it, Like, we don't want to talk about Raw. We don't want to talk about SmackDown. We don't want to talk about Dynamite. We wanted to talk about, stories, how they're told, that sort of thing. But at a certain point, I feel like we've just consumed so much of that over 5 years now that it's like, you know what? Let's just watch a match. A match sounds good to me.
Yeah, and also, too, I mean, I'm talking about on the franchise Untold, which essentially just takes a very memorable match from wrestling history and just analyzing it again.
Not even really untold, too. Some of these things have been told before. But yeah, it's a nice, tight, 30-minute conceit. I like that.
Yeah, and so it's a good conceit, and it just talks about wrestling matches, and it's rare we get to do that. But in its simplicity and in its presentation and in its content matter, we actually get to really dissect a lot here. Because there's a lot of things that this hits on, which is Kurt Angle in his prime, Shawn Michaels in his second prime, I guess, and then WrestleMania matches between the two.
Yeah, and this is I enjoy this a ton, Walt, because this is an era where I was totally checked out of wrestling. I think you were in and out at this point, right? You were watching some of it, but not watching a ton?
So, this was when I got fully back into it.
Okay.
Because we got this freshman year of college, we got this in the dorms, this particular WrestleMania, because we used to do the Batista thumbs up, thumbs down taunt to each other. And we used to watch Raw every Monday, and this by the beginning of freshman year to the end of freshman year culminated in this WrestleMania. So at this point, I was like fully back into the fold, and for better or for worse. But this was a pretty good era though, and if you look at the card, this is a very good WrestleMania.
Yeah, and this match is obviously fantastic. I'd never seen it. I'd heard about it, and especially this whole era of Michaels matches. You and I were talking before we came on. I was just trying to place this in the timeline of okay, Michaels came back, and what was the order of the Mania matches? Because he had a great little run here, and we can talk about it in more detail because I know you have opinions on it. But it is weirdly, I want to say, just unique in terms of the opponents he faced. Chris Jericho. I'm going out of order. Chris Jericho, Ric Flair, John Cena, Kurt Angle, Vince McMahon, Undertaker, obviously at the end. It's all the names are Hall of Famers, borderline Mount Rushmore types. Minus Vince McMahon from a wrestling standpoint, but certainly from a crazy old man, billionaire wrestling impresario standpoint. But it is cool just to look at it on paper and be like, wow, Michaels came back and he had a bunch of interesting matches, against opponents that are not necessarily unique. They were all top of the pile, but it's cool that they at least gave him a little sampling of everybody, they gave him pretty much a run through past, present, and future of that eras of other wrestling greats.
Yeah, I feel like back then too, just because Michaels didn't really fight for the title a whole lot, specifically at WrestleMania, except for the I think that was like 2007 against Cena. But that was kind of just to fill in for Triple H, who was injured. At that point, Michaels wasn't fighting for titles. It was just like, hey, Kurt Angle, you've nothing really going on. Like, why don't you just have an epic 5-star match with Shawn Michaels, and that'll essentially be what anyone remembers from that WrestleMania anyway. So it's almost a better reward in some respects. So
And that really fits the Michaels persona of that era too, because the whole knock on him was that he was a crazy, egotistical weirdo for so much of his career who was, potentially doped up or drunk or something like that. But this era, it was all about, he was still very cocky and very sure of himself, but he was also certainly more selfless, more easy to work with, more of like a regular dude. So the fact that he didn't angle for the title constantly and demand to be at the top of the card, but still had, like you said, arguably the most memorable match at maybe all of those Manias, one or two notwithstanding, but like the bulk of those ones we described are the ones people talk about. And like that sort of is like the cool fuck you from this era Michaels, where it's like, I don't care if I'm for the belt, but if you give me a match, I'm going to give you 25 to 30 minutes and it's going to rule. Like, and that's its own sort of fuck you in its own way, where we can all give him a big thumbs up because we're like, that's just great. Like, everybody enjoys this. This is fun for everybody.
Yeah. And also these kinds of matches that Michaels was having, like specifically the one with Angle, it's kind of like this forgotten art of long-term booking that WWE has just like completely thrown that playbook out the window, where it's like Angle was at the Royal Rumble. He wanted to win the Royal Rumble to fight for the title. Michaels eliminates him. Angle gets pissed, retaliates, and they have a 2-month-long program that leads to this epic WrestleMania match. It's like, it's not that complicated. And that was just such a textbook. Like, it's not complicated for both good and bad reasons, but at the end of the day, like, it's a textbook reason for these two to get together and just have a memorable moment. And like, I don't see why it's so goddamn hard about that.
And it's so clean too. Like, it's just, one thing I will say about this documentary, which is very good. It's a half hour long. Like, it's an easy watch, an easy lift, but it leaves out a little chunk of the build. It leaves out apparently the Marty Jannetty elements. Marty Jannetty was involved. The documentary mentions that Kurt Angle beats up sensational Sherry Martel, which is fun. Like, that's great. He does a Shawn Michaels, impression and then gets Sherry in the ankle lock, which is fun. And they left out the part where he beats up Marty Jannetty, which is weird because I don't get why Sherry's in and Marty's out. I know Marty's an interesting man, to say the least, and potentially a murderer, but right. I don't get why you leave that out. But like, even if they had included that, like, there's no bells and whistles. There's no like it starts at Rumble, it ends at Mania. It's two big name guys, two great wrestlers, and mostly it's just trying to get you from A to B. Like, it's like issue and then match at WrestleMania. Like, there's just no need for more than that sometimes. And like, that does seem like now it should be that straightforward many, many times over these days. And they always throw a wrench or a curve or a twist, and you're like, no, just give me the guys and give me the match. That's really all we need.
This also was a time too, and I don't know if this is for better or for worse, but like, this was also like the peak of brand separation, where like throughout the match, like, I had forgotten this context, but throughout the match, it was like JR and King were announcing, and they're like, oh yeah, well, Angle's a SmackDown wrestler. I don't know how they do it on SmackDown. I'm like, oh right, they were on different brands. But like, back then, when there was a brand divider, and like, you didn't see these people come together for super shows and all that, like, nowadays it's just so rampant, and brand separation is completely meaningless. But back then they did do a good enough job to try and keep the brand separate. And then when there was because I remember that Mania specifically, I think that was like the billionaires versus billionaire match, whereas Umaga was on one brand and Lashley was on another, and like, they made it a point for WrestleMania to be this like battleground for the different brands, just because everybody was going to be on the same show. And so you actually get that kind of sense of just like, not only these two never like fought before, like, they're not, them coming together is such a special circumstance because, Angle is on Friday nights and Michaels is on Monday. And it just seems like this was like a particular case where it actually felt right versus every other time where it never feels right.
And they presumably had to plan their encounters a little more, because they weren't on the same show. They probably didn't feel like they had to encounter each other so often because even the build up to Mania, I imagine not every time they were on the other one's show. And when they were on the other one's show, it probably like, okay, we only get like 3 or 4 of these maybe, so let's make it count. As opposed to now where they're like, you can just see them racking their brains every week, like what the hell are we gonna do this week? The same shit we did last. Like it's so monotonous and repetitive now. Back then, I could see the newness of the brand separation, the like you said, the distinction they actually made between the two shows. I could see it being a little more sacrosanct and a little more like let's make this mean something. Where like you said, now it's almost like stupid it even exists. Like why is this?
Yeah.
Just make them run into each other all the time. Who cares?
Yeah, it was just definitely a time and a place,
and obviously 2 of the best people to ever do the job, so that helps a lot too. Like two like really really good like tweeners, I would say, like especially at this point, like both really good at playing both sides. Obviously, when Michaels came back, I imagine it was hard to boo him, but in this match, he does a really good job of getting heat as a heel every now and then when he needs to. And then Angle was always so great at being a huge dickhead, but also being kind of likable at the same time. Like they both have this rarefied air around them, where I think it's really fun to see them going at each other.
Yeah, I forgot about those moments where Michaels did heelish stuff. I mean, they never really leaned hard one way or the other. And frankly, they shouldn't have, because like it was just a match between 2 characters, and it just so happens that one is a little bit more like Angle was aggressive, but he wasn't a heel per se. And Michaels did heel things, but he wasn't like an offender, or he wasn't like vicious.
I thought it
And
was fun because I feel like it was tapping into. It was sort of like Michaels had this history of being a dick, and it's like he just when he's in trouble, or whether when he's frustrated or angry, he can't resist going back to that well.
Well, if anything, though, like by the end of the match, you could kind of recontextualize everything. And it's like Michaels was desperate, and because Angle was just on top of him the entire match. I mean, with the exception of the beginning where he actually showed off why he is a professional wrestler and can wrestle. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. Professional wrestlers can actually wrestle too. That's so weird.
I love the beginning of the match too. Like, so we should say we watched the documentary and we watched the match, which, like I said, I've never seen, and I love the part of the match itself that was great. Is like the beginning is both of them. Michael's doing a bunch of mat wrestling, a bunch of headlocks and stuff on Angle, and they sell it as just like Michaels is just trying, maybe not get in his head so much, but just like I'm gonna bombard him with a bunch of little things. I'm gonna do death by 1,000 cuts. I'm gonna just try and maybe psych him out a little bit, but also just sort of wear him down with a bunch of weird moves. And Angle sells it so well for like 5 or so minutes, where he's like, I just didn't expect this. And like, he doesn't seem hurt at all, but he just seems sort of annoyed, and like, why is this the way it's going? And like, it doesn't really go further than that, but it's just such a great start to the match. Then they start getting into all the fun stuff, but like, it is just a great little way to get them going. A relatively unique way to get them going.
Overall, though, I thought, like, to that point, I think that the match was just like perfectly paced. Like the first 5 was just mat wrestling and getting in the other person's head, mind games, and then you had like the peak of the middle 10 was like big high spots, top rope things, the Angle slam into the post, and then like a big spot at the table, just simmer for a second, the big like double count, like the tease double count out, and then like you get to like the last 7 or 8 minutes, which was just all like nuts.
Yeah,
and
we're just spamming like, finishers, but it was before spamming finishers is like the way all these matches go,
Yeah, in many ways, this is like an archetype for a latter day, quote unquote, like high profile, big main roster.
I know you have more to say about this, but I was thinking AJ Styles, John Cena the entire time I was watching it. I was like, This is the same match. We just see that now. I know there's an in-between one that you're going to talk about at some point that is the next step to that in a bad way, according to you. But I was just like, this is exactly the same as the AJ. In a good way, like it's a good match, but like you said, this is clearly the one that came, if not first, then pretty close to first.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I mean, this is now going beyond the match at this point, where it's it's its legacy. It's like what is the result of this like phenomenal match? Because I think at the time I don't think people were excited. Like I was excited to see the match because they were both good wrestlers, but I don't think anyone expected it to be a show stealing, like once in a lifetime, like like for a while there before HBK faced Taker. This was considered like the best match at WrestleMania or possibly ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like just to some people, like to me, I'm like that was like magic. That was like nuts.
Did you feel that way when you saw it the first time when you were watching it live?
Oh my god, yeah. I mean, like you had no idea who's gonna win. You never see Michaels tap out. Like you never see like he kicked out of all those like superhero he. It was like so unpredictable by the time we got to the end. I mean, you could kind of tell that like Angle was gonna win, but like I literally had no idea he was gonna tap out. I'm like, when is he gonna like get to the rope? Because I'd never seen Michaels do that before. But all that is to say is like what they captured that night, I feel like influenced WWE booking for the next like 6 years.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean,
yeah.
I know, like, I think this is an accurate statement. I don't mean to besmirch that era, but, like, I think this was still, the tail end of the Attitude Era, or at least the crossing over into, Cena obviously becoming a star. Michaels is back, but Michaels really was not really there for a lot of the Attitude Era, and obviously this was, as you said, maybe his best run of all. Like, there was Benoit, there was Jericho, there was Edge, there was Christian. I feel like this was when they sort of transitioned a little more. Eddie's there into, like, good matches. Like, these couple years, because I know Benoit and Eddie obviously had their moment at WrestleMania 20, and, like, I feel like they were starting to embrace a little more, like, we can have good matches with these guys. Like, during the Rock and Austin era, I loved some of those matches, but it was more about the story, like, the hook was Austin was just the funniest, coolest guy in the world. Rock was so charismatic. Taker, as good as he was, Kane was not good at matches. Like, Foley, like, again, Foley was great,
Thank you
but,
for
like,
saying that.
Foley didn't put, like, yeah, sorry, not to, I know you hate Kane, but, all those guys weren't, like, 25-minute match guys. Like, that just really was not their speed. So I feel like this is the era where you start seeing that a little more. Like, not all, like, looking at the card, like, it wasn't obviously those are few and far between, but those are, Mania at least, I feel like Mania started having, like, one big wrestling match, at least one big wrestling match every year, and this was, so beloved. I can see why they would use this as sort of a blueprint for so many to follow, because it was great.
Yeah, I mean, I think we brought this up before, but like false finishes weren't really a thing before this match.
Finishers were finishers, right? You just get hit and you lose.
Right, or you just like keep doing the same finisher over and over until you win. Like, but so that's when I say it influenced booking decisions for the next 6 years. It's like, for better or for worse, like I feel like after that Angle Michaels match, I feel like I saw that same match again. A, from other people, and B, from Michaels himself, because if you go back and watch the Cena Michaels main event from 2 years later, they literally run back the same goddamn spots from the Angles Michaels match.
Like he does the FU from the top rope, I presume, right?
I can't remember. All I remember
feels, if he doesn't, he might as well.
I remember vividly though they did the springboard to the table that Michaels did on Kurt Angle in that match, and with Cena he did like a moonsault. That was like the big out of the ring spot that they tease a big count out afterwards because they both men are down, and also too Michaels taps after like 20 minutes of being in the what was it, the FU, the STFU,
I can't
whatever the hell they call it.
Yeah, that's a shame. Like, cause I've never seen that match either. That's another weird blind spot in my wrestling fandom. Just certainly wasn't watching at that point. But I'm not surprised to hear that. That sounds like a WWE thing to do for sure. Run it back. Like, obviously Cena was nowhere near Angle, in any real way. But I could see their move sets being similar enough, and their like largeness and strength being similar enough. They're like, well, do the same thing over again. And I'm sure it was a good match, but diminishing returns. Like, it's just never going to be as good as this one.
I mean, you could even say that the Michaels Taker from a few years after that at WrestleMania was a very similar like match.
But that was like, you know, the I know I'm telling you a thing you already know, but the gravitas, the importance, like that's the whole hook of that one, right?
Well, I think they somehow found a way to break through that mold into a like new stratosphere, which I can't even tell you how, like why, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it does. That transcended what was before, like the Angle Michaels match was just like an S class, like a clinic on what a 5-star WWE match was, and like or a Mania match or whatever you want, however you want to define it, and then like somehow Taker and Michaels made it that much more special, which is like to their credit. But you know, again though, like to both the detriment and to their credit, like they created a spectacle and a moment that WWE is like, people like this, and we need to like, we shouldn't do more of that, which I think is good because they made for good matches. I mean, like the Cena Michaels match wasn't bad. It's you know, it just became a little bit like derivative almost after a while. Which
yeah, and they can't cater to people like you who remember everything of every match for like 2 decades. Like I'm sure 99% of people watching, maybe not that many, but 95% of people watching the match were just excited to see a great match, and then 5% are like, well, it was good, but it was very similar to Austin Michaels, and it's like, well, I mean, like you said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like it's it is a good. There is as there's only so many ways to do a match. I mean, obviously there are people who disagree with me and people who have proven that there are other ways. But when it comes down to it, there's not. Everyone's got a move set. Everyone's there's a template. Like it does. Most things do follow something you've seen before, and when executed right, that's rarely a bad thing because execution is most of it, in my opinion. Like do it right with good performers, and it doesn't matter if we've seen it before. It just matters that it rules.
Yeah, I mean, again, of course, I have to take a step back and admit that this is just in my crazy smart head.
And I agree with you. I don't think you're wrong. I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm playing the side of the WrestleMania audience, which is 2 million people who don't give a shit. So
no, I mean, if they put on that caliber of match in WWE today, it would be considered the best match they put on in like 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say that the latter day WWE has this new way to present like a high profile match, and like the Lesnar Goldberg like big Haas like throwdowns became like the new big like marquee main event WrestleMania like main event match, which also is great in its own right, but like it just took a huge left turn to like these big false finish 5-star like Tokyo Dome s classics that WWE tried their best to do. So I mean, again, this is a time and a place though. This was like really the first time they really did stuff like this, and so I think that's where it's like no one expected it because they had never really done that before.
And I feel like that's obviously that's influenced by MMA. I think it's assuming that like 5 minutes can be as good as 25 minutes if it's 5 impactful, tense minutes, which I don't personally agree with. I just don't love MMA a ton. So when wrestling ends in 5 minutes, I'm like, this isn't real. Like, why? It's like, this isn't, a fight. Like, I just don't, I think you're straining the credulity of the fans when you're trying to be like, no, it's over in 5 minutes. Like, yeah, but these guys aren't really like, they're not really hurting each other. Like, it should be, it's like a ballet. It's a dance. Like, it should last a little while. But I think they're also recognizing, like, this is what we have now. Like, they don't have an Angle. They don't have a Michaels. Like, even though they have a lot of very good performers still, the charisma's not there. The ring generalness, which is like a like literally being a ring general, being able to like been doing this for 30 years, knows how to do everything. Or Kurt Angle's sake, who has not been doing it for 10 years, but is a savant who's amazing at it. Like, they don't have those kind of guys anymore. Like, as much as we were all hyped for like Shinsuke Nakamura, AJ Styles, like, I don't. Maybe they could have had a 5-star match at WrestleMania. Looking back, I was like, I don't know if those guys in this world in this time can do this, like I feel like for for all their skills, they're lacking a certain something that a Michaels and an Angle just have, and you can't replicate it, you can't duplicate it. Like, it sort of is what it is.
Well, in the case of like a Nakamura or AJ Styles, I don't think it works in WWE because you're not allowed to. They're probably not given the leeway to have the match that made them famous and successful in the first place. And so what you get is just some weird, like, bastardized version of it that clearly was not memorable. And I forgot that was a match until you just said that. But I feel like also, like, Mike, you forgot that Michaels is the guy that, like, he was given the green light to kind of just go. It's like, oh, if it's you have 20 minutes. It's like, yeah, so I'm going to take 28 minutes because good luck trying to top it because it was that.
Or good luck trying to stop me. Like, I'm out there. Like, you can't really make me stop wrestling. So I guess I'll just keep wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, but he had Vince's like go ahead to like if it's good then keep going, and like he famously was known for taking up more time than he was given, but like sorry, Bruce Pritchard. Like, he went over and made WrestleMania history again. Like, I'm sorry that throws off the timing of your, like, the rest of your crappy show.
Yeah, I guess you got to cut down the Cena JBL match a few minutes.
Yeah, the famous 10-man tag at WrestleMania 10 that never happened because the ladder match, the first ever high-profile ladder match, went a little long. It's like, oh, boo-hoo.
Were we watching WrestleMania 10 together?
No, I was not watching.
Oh, wow.
I was 95 and on.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, you missed, I'm sure, I was going to say, I wonder if you were lamenting, I think Men on a Mission were in the 10-man tag, right?
I couldn't tell you.
I feel like they must have been. That's where you put Men on a Mission.
I believe Crush was on the show.
Yeah, Crush was Macho Man.
Tatanka.
Probably Tatanka, yeah, I can see
people.
that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. The point of this conversation is not about the 10-man tag.
No.
WrestleMania 10. The point is, Shawn Michaels goes long, and everybody kind of just accepts this.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're right. I'm sure, a Michael and an Angle's get a lot more leeway than a Nakamura and a Styles do, and maybe that's part of the issue. Like, we're not backstage, I don't know the ins and outs, but maybe if they were untethered, they could have had a wonderful 25-minute match. Obviously, like they said, what you had was poopy butts, and no one thinks about it or cares about it ever again. But point well taken, though. But again, it's for better or worse, it's the Michaels mystique hangs so heavy over this, like we opened it up talking about his matches. Like, as much as I love Kurt Angle, no one remembers Kurt Angle's WrestleMania run, like we remember the Lesnar match, we remember this match, and then it's sort of like he's just around a bunch. But like, this Michaels run is historic in so many ways because it ends with the Taker doubleheader, which is two classic matches, but just like, he was just so good when he came back. And watching this match again, so many little things, everything is crisp. Not to deny Angle his role in this, but just like, Michaels is just, every little thing he does so well, and every big thing he does well too. Like, he sort of makes fun of his skill set in the documentary, or he makes fun of his moveset a little bit in the documentary, but it's like, you have all the moves you need. Like, you don't need any more moves. Like, I appreciate you doing some more headlocks and arm holds and stuff at the beginning, but like, you're pretty good, man. You don't need to add a ton to that repertoire.
It's funny because I don't feel like I'm going out on a limb to say this because Angle himself has said this 1,000 times. Is like, this is probably the most important match of that guy's career, for sure. He's constantly quoted to saying like, this was the greatest match of my career. Mm-hmm. And so, I think the ones you listed are good. I mean, maybe you put up his match with Eddie the year before as memorable, but it's really more memorable because it was Eddie's big moment than Angle's big moment. And so it's funny they brought up the fact that Angle quote unquote outlasted 5 other superstars inside of a Hell in a Cell. I'm like, oh man, he won that 6-person clusterfuck Hell in a Cell where Rikishi fell off the top.
Oh, there was a mattresses.
Yeah. It's like, when you really break it down, it's like, these are some of his quote unquote biggest moments. Like, so
But that's sort of what I'm saying, though, right? Like, cause he came up like his early days were in a time when there weren't, his opponents were not the ones who had the big long matches. Like, he definitely he held his own against Austin and Rock, and like probably made them look like $1,000,000. But it wasn't until the sort of end of his career, end of his like early great run, that he starts getting opponents that can go 25 minutes with him and really, give him a wrestling run for his money.
I mean, he was considered like the worker when he would get in the ring with The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and those are good matches. I enjoy some of those too, but they were not Michaels' angle.
Or even Austin. And Austin has always been known as an amazing worker. But during the Attitude Era, to your point, yeah, it was all story. It was all like, how is he going to get screwed by McMahon or not get screwed by McMahon this time? And it's like they threw Angle in there because they knew that he could go. And it's like he was a main event mechanic.
Yep.
In many ways. And that's not to slight him, but like that's kind of how I'm kind of putting this together in my head as we're kind of just painting this picture of this guy's like career, which was, I'm not trying to disparage in any way, but it's just true. Like he didn't have a Michaels for a long time, which is why when he went to SmackDown, in SmackDown 6, he's working with like Ray, and he's working with like Jericho, or he's working with Edge. It's like, oh, now he's putting on these like unbelievably like memorable matches, even though it wasn't necessarily the main event, or like main event level with regards to like working with The Rock. But just Angle in WWE is just he's kind of worn a lot of hats in many ways.
Yep. And this is not, this is an opinion for sure. I don't mean to present it as a fact. But when you have a Kurt Angle out there giving you a 20-minute main event, 25-minute main event with a lot of good working and a lot of importance and a lot of like literal wrestling. Like I love the Attitude Era as much as anybody. That's when we both came up. Like I think character-wise and like moment-wise, you can't beat it. But there's something about a 20, 25-minute match that really works that just feels more important, It feels like it matters, especially when it's for a belt or at a WrestleMania. Like I love a good story, I love a good interview, I love the other things that make wrestling entertaining, but a 25-minute match that is done to perfection is just like, it's the best. Like that's why we're watching the show. Like we love the other stuff as build up and all that, but at the end of the day, I think you have to perform in the ring. And like perform has many definitions. It doesn't always mean 25 minutes, but I really enjoy watching something like this because I'm like, this is what I like to see. Like these guys are athletes, they're they are entertainers, like they can do both, are wrestlers, like they do all these things. Like you see all of this in a match like this, and primarily the wrestling, but the other stuff is there too. And it just, as much as I enjoy the guys who didn't have to do this or couldn't do this or had other skill sets, I really just think these things are a lot of the stuff that we take away, Yeah,
I mean, you look back on this, and I have to do the math, but I guess it's been 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not true.
No,
it's been 17 or 16 or something.
I mean, getting close though. You're not wrong. This was in 2005, so it's been 16 years.
WrestleMania 21.
17 years in a few months. So
yes,
17 is almost 20. So
that's fair. But ultimately, looking back on it from today, it's like, oh yeah, it's a no-brainer that these two would have like a Matt Classic that people would want to do a WWE Untold about last year on. And at the time, I don't think people really looked at it like that because this was in the middle of the goddamn card.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, obviously you're going to have those matches like the curtain jerker opening matches at WrestleMania where you do put your best workers in there and it becomes more memorable than the main event sometimes. But like, it just seems like inconceivable that you wouldn't look at this and be like, how is this not the co-main event? Or you put it as close to the back end of the card as possible because this is what people are going to want to see. But I just feel like, and this is maybe I'm painting my memory differently just because I'm trying to make a point. But like, I feel like watching that card, I was excited for it because I love Shawn Michaels. I wasn't excited for it because I expected what we ended up getting.
Mm-hmm. But that's also like, that's sometimes you go into a movie and you're not super pumped, and then it shocks you, you remember that far more. Like I think it does add to the mystique of this a little bit. I agree that in retrospect, it's so obvious that like I wouldn't be surprised looking at this card if Vince was a little more pumped for Orton Taker or Cena JBL even, because he's like, the future of the company is Cena and Orton. Like I want to see what these young kids can do against quote unquote good opponents. Like sorry, love Taker, don't love JBL, but obviously this is it's not the money maker necessarily, but it is. It's why it's one of those like it's like a big budget movie that goes for Oscars and like succeeds both critically and commercially. It's like this is why you do this, because it makes some money and is successful financially, but also this is why you do it because it just rules. It's good, solid 27-minute, two guys at the height of their careers kicking ass. Like it's presumably it's some part of Vince must recognize after the fact like this is why I love this, because I get to put stuff like this out into the world, and like it doesn't necessarily sell the most t-shirts, but it sells a shitload of t-shirts and a shitload of buy rates and DVDs, and like it is good business and it's good artistic wrestling. And like maybe you can't force that either though. Maybe that comes when you give these guys a certain spot on a card, disrespect them a tad, ignore them a tad, let them do their own thing, and all of a sudden you look up and you're getting magic.
Well, I'm pretty sure Vince just counts the zeros on the check at the end of the day. But but yeah, I mean, I think that it's funny because when Michaels and Taker had their retirement match, or not their retirement, Taker kept wrestling. When Michaels had his retirement match a few years later, it's like, we're well into the era of like you need celebrity, you need like Cena has to be in the main event because WrestleMania is a household name, and you want that breakout like star or name or something that's going to attract a casual wrestling fan that maybe has stopped watching or just like on ESPN's front page. And Michaels during this time was so like, I want to say mainstream, but like when you thought about WrestleMania and that during that stretch, like Shawn Michaels was one of the first people you thought of. And the fact that they made him the WrestleMania main event several times throughout this. Like he's a wrestling fans wrestler. He's not Roman Reigns. He's not necessarily like going to be on the Today Show and be that breakout star. Like he's a wrestling fans wrestler. And it just so happened that like he was so good on that stage during this time that you couldn't deny him those top spots. And I think that's like, because like that's just like incredible, because I don't think that happens with other people.
No, I mean, we've talked about that before with Ric Flair, like, in discussing the greats and what they add to the table and, like, this mainstream appeal. Like, obviously everyone knows Ric Flair, and I think, like you said, most people know Shawn Michaels if you follow wrestling casually or sports or whatever. But I think that Flair and Michaels have that commonality in that they earned their spots through being great at wrestling. Like, it wasn't, like... They both had their interview moments. They both had some mainstream, like they both had their qualities otherwise, but first and foremost, they were wrestlers, And I think the reason everyone looks back on them so fondly, despite all their great traits in and around the ring, is mostly because of what's in the ring. And that is an amazing sort of accomplishment, because you see Rock, you see Austin, you see Cena, you see, like you said, Roman Reigns even to a certain extent. Like these guys have more going on beyond that. Either they have aspirations for it or they're just good at it. Like they, you and I both seen Shawn Michaels in the Marine 5 or whatever the fuck it was.
Yes, we have.
He doesn't have the aura outside of the ring that we've come to. We like, oh man, this guy pops here, but he pops in the ring, and like to be able to, like you said, to earn this mantle and this kudos and like the accolades he's gotten over his career, almost all of them because he's great at wrestling, is something worth celebrating. And that's why I think you love him with all your heart. I love him with most of my heart, but I think he's got to be in your top 10 all time, probably maybe not top 5. I don't know, it depends. But like but again, he's there for a very distinct reason that not everyone else in that sort of ranking can really lay claim to. They're usually good at something else. He's good at wrestling.
Yeah, right. And Angle became that person too until he left for reasons we won't get into.
Yeah.
But
And because his neck exploded and he was on drugs and all bunch of other stuff.
those are the reasons I was not going to get into.
Yeah, but not his fault. I mean, like, yeah, mostly not his fault. Circumstantial, very sad. But I think you're right. He would have been in that same sphere had he stayed healthy and stuck around.
Yeah, right. But ultimately, though, that's to your point. It's like this was their role. It's just like being that like wrestling glue that would be on these main big cards, and like just really became attractions in themselves for wrestling and for wrestling mostly. And so I would put them very high on the list. And it's funny though, because like Michaels like coined himself Mr. WrestleMania for the lead of this build up to this match as a way to like kind of just say like, oh, I'm Mr. WrestleMania and just because you're the Olympian, but I'm Mr. WrestleMania, and like created this like weird aura around the fact that like you can't beat him at WrestleMania, even though he has this win-loss record. It's terrible at WrestleMania. but like he just created that moniker, and like now that's all I remember him for.
And he sort of passed that on to Taker in a way too, and gave Taker's streak even more credibility because he beat Michaels twice. You know, like there's a case to be made that Taker's streak doesn't feel the same way unless he beats Mr. WrestleMania twice in a row. So it's all, like you said, it's all just like bullshit that he came up with out of nowhere. Like it's not a plan; it's just the way it worked out.
But now, like one of his legacies is the fact that he showed the fuck up at WrestleMania and delivered 5 stars.
Yep.
Or not even 5 stars, just the most memorable moments in wrestling history.
Yep.
This one included.
Sure. And speaking of, well, to wrap up here, is this one of your top 5 WrestleMania matches of all time?
Easily, by hands down. If the ticket match doesn't happen, I would put this probably like 1.
Wow.
This was so damn like at the time, like look at you probably don't agree with this, and I don't even agree with this in my current body, but like at the time, this was so goddamn special. Like, and I can't even like articulate how.
Because you were caught off guard, right? It was just so, you just didn't see it coming necessarily, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, like, no matter what the expectations were, they they blew it out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like, I had not seen it until 5 hours ago, but I find it hard to argue. Like, I'm maybe not top 5, but in the running, and certainly one of the best wrestling matches I've ever seen at a WrestleMania. Like, I would tend to lean towards more, like, I would probably put this under, like, Rock Hogan, because, like, Rock Hogan was just so fun to see at the time, and also to remember the context, and to be the age we were when we saw it, and to appreciate the generations running into each other. Like, that's something that I might, but that is pure spectacle, like, and it's hard to separate spectacle from wrestling, in terms of what you value out of a Mania match. But this is, regardless of which one you lean towards, this is certainly in the conversation, probably top 10, certainly, near top 5 for me, and just so fun to watch. It's like genuinely a thrill to watch it. Like, knew what was going to happen. You obviously watched the documentary first, so had just seen many of these spots, a half hour beforehand, and still loved them all because of, again, how crisp, how smart they were when they were placed in the match, like the way the two guys doing them. Like, it's just brilliant. Like, it's 2 guys who just instinctually and, intellectually understand how to do this job and do it as well as anybody ever has.
Yeah, I mean, this is why he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time.
Yeah, hard to argue. And like I said, I love confident Dick Michaels and not petulant Dick Michaels. Like, I love Michaels being a dick because he's clear-headed and knows he's better than you.
Yeah.
I don't really love Michaels being a dick because he's just hopped up on pills and is a weird, paranoid weirdo. But later career Michaels is fascinating, like, in all the best ways. Like, he grows in. I think he might be my favorite. Well, he's probably my top 5 favorite, like, character of all time, just because it's just so cool the way it all worked out for him. Yeah, and he seems like a good guy now too. He seems like genuinely a nice dude. Yeah. So
there's definitely nuance there with confident Dick Michaels versus petulant Dick Michaels. But
probably a fine line. Some people probably say there's really no difference at all.
In my youth, I was able to separate the art from the artist, and I still do that.
Oh yeah, I was with you there at WrestleMania 12, popping a sparkling apple cider for HBK. So I'm not saying I wasn't on board, but I just really love when he gets his shit together and still is as sort of like cutthroat and good as he was before, if not better, like we said. So
He's the best.
Yep, he's on the list, and this was a great match. If you haven't seen it in a while, this doc's on Peacock, and this match is on Peacock, and they're both very much worth watching. What we didn't mention at all, the talking heads in the documentary are Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, sort of Michael Cole, and randomly Johnny Gargano. So.
Yeah, two quick points to make on that is one is they must have fucked up Michael Cole's audio because it sounds like he was recorded in the middle of a hallway. His echo was horrible. I don't know why. That was the case, but and then also I guess Johnny Gargano is like him and Adam Cole became like the talking heads for like hey, remember when this happened? Because I was a fan back then and I remember, and let me tell you why this is important. It's like, sure, I guess it makes sense.
I mean, his enthusiasm seems genuine, but yeah, of all the people that are like employed by you now and in the past, and like he's the one you go to for the outside commentary, like whatever. He's certainly it's totally fine. Like it was benign at worst, but it just made me laugh that he was the guy they went to.
He always is.
Well, it's a good doc. The Untold series, Walt, I got to say, is one of my favorites on the network now. It's short, it's concise, and it does nostalgia, but it does that mix of, here's what happened back then, and here's our current insight. Like, I really enjoy everything about it. We should do more of them.
I don't see why not.
Let's just do a run of a bunch of Untolds and just knock this out.
Great.
All right, everybody. We're doing like 6 Untolds in a row. So
it's better than WWE's foray into fiction sometimes. So.
It is better than Big Show Show. It is better than Chronicle. It's better than many, many other things. So we love Untold. We're an Untold podcast, and this is a great one to watch. Even if it's a little old, it's very much worth your time. And again, watch this match if you haven't in a while, because it really is great. So
Awesome Truth is rebranding to the Untold podcast. We will have 20 episodes and then end.
Hey, you know what? If WWE wants to hire us and make us the Untold mouthpieces, adding like the post Walking Dead show they do, where they discuss the Walking. We'll talk about every Untold
Talking
episode.
Dead?
Yeah, Talking Dead. We're talking Untold or whatever the hell they want to call us. That'd be fine by me.
God, that's a niche of a niche of a niche.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we can pitch it to the right people. But
it'll just be called Told.
It's true. Actually, it's a pretty good name. WWE Told, starring Steve and Walt.
Untold talking podcast.
They'd be like, guys, all of your episodes are longer than the Untold episodes you're talking about, or as long as the match and the Untold itself combined. So
shut up, you nerds.
Well, go watch this match, go watch this doc, and if you want more Awesome Truth, you can find us, as always, awesometruth.libsyn.com. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at awesometruthpod. Well, great to kick off 2022 with something fun and nice and wrestling-y. We should probably do a little more wrestling on the show this year. What do you think?
Wow. It's only taken us 4+ years to get to that. We should probably talk more wrestling.
Well, we've consumed so much, tangential content that it's probably time to just like hunker now with matches. So,
well, I'm okay with that.
Sure, we'll see. It's an idea. It'd be fun. So
we'll see.
That's why you gotta subscribe. We'll bat it around. Please check us out, whatever we do in 2022. And thanks so much for listening. Remember, the truth will set you free.